I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
Tonight we're on page 27 of our notes, our class book. And in lesson 5, talking about alleged historical and scientific discrepancies or inaccuracies in the Bible. We have said all the way through, doesn't matter how many questions a skeptic has, we can answer those questions, and there will always be one more, and then one more, and then one more. And there might be some questions that we can't answer. But we have answered all of these ones up until now. Does that mean we cannot have faith in God if we cannot have every answer to every question that either we have or is ever posed to us? Why not? Why can we still trust in God?
Well, we try and do our best to answer everything in the question that's given us, but God's given us what we need to know. We can understand that, so our faith has got to be in that.
Yeah. It recognizes, that's absolutely true, our faith needs to be in God and not in mankind. We need to recognize that we need a humility to understand we don't know everything. That archaeologists claim they know a lot of things. And I'm not saying they're out there lying to everyone. I'm not. There might be some who are what I'll call junk archaeologists. Just like in every field, there's someone who's just out to make money, make a name for themselves, really not do the work that is necessary. But they come from a perspective that there is no God, and they seek to find evidence that shows that. In reality, you cannot prove there is no God. That's an improvable statement. People use the evidence that they find to justify their conclusions. And I invariably ask people, where did this universe come from? How can this universe explain itself? Doesn't matter how many questions we have about it, where did it come from? If someone wants to believe in the Big Bang, which I believe the Bible does not teach, you still have that fundamental question 13.9 billion years ago. If it's 13.8, that's this universe's age. Where did time come from? What caused the Big Bang? If there was such a Big Bang. And a good scientist will say, I don't know. They may not ascribe that to God. But if we speculate on what they don't know, from a scientific standpoint, then they really are being dishonest, because scientifically you cannot know. Now, they might accuse us of the same thing. Well, how can you know? Well, our faith is grounded upon that there is a Creator, and that He has revealed Himself to us, not only through His creation, but through Jesus Christ. Remember, John chapter 1 says that no one has seen the Father, but the Word has come to reveal Him to us. Jesus tells us of the Father, shows us the Father, shows us the works of the Father. We can look out into creation and to see all of the things that God has done, all of the different systems that are out there and how they all work together, how they can't just possibly come from nothing or out by chance, no matter how much chance you have. If you were a gambler and the odds that everything comes together like this, you'd never take that bet, because the odds would be so infinitesimal that it would be practically impossible. Whenever you get down into probabilities of 1 in something with like 30, 40, 50 zeros, you're saying that's practically impossible that it happened. And it happened just like that. And so the skeptic is always going to find a reason not to believe in God. We can't go digging down every hole and say, well, if God did it this way, then we have this problem. No, we don't. Because if God did it one way, God is God. So I was listening to someone on YouTube, and they were saying, well, if the ark really existed, Noah's flood really existed, then and it changed the geography of this earth, like creationists want to say, then we're missing a lot of heat. In other words, moving land that quickly is going to produce heat. And under normal circumstances, this person was right. But does that prevent God from doing it? No, it doesn't. The rain itself was a miracle. We don't get worldwide floods. We don't. We get localized floods. We get rains that might last a couple days, 40-day rains. California is getting a lot of rain, but they haven't gotten a 40-day rain. The entire state of California is not underwater. The entire west coast of the United States isn't underwater, and neither is this continent. To come along and say, well, that's a natural event. No, it's a supernatural event. God used maybe a natural way with water, but he was involved in that. He had to be. And so if this geography of this earth changed, God had to be involved in that too. And I don't discount anything. God created the universe in 6 days. Perhaps if he had just done it the way, following natural means, maybe it would have taken billions of years. But he didn't do it that way. It's not what we have described to us. We have 6 days, not eons and eons of time. So let's move on to point 2, which is alleged scientific discrepancies. And some of these are rather old, but this first one, unfortunately, has reared its ugly head in the last 4 or 5 years. And that we have people who are thinking that the earth is flat, and some who are religious who think the Bible teaches that the earth is flat. Doesn't matter how many pictures we have of this earth, it's all a grand conspiracy to try to tell us that the earth is round. But don't you know that the Bible says it's flat? The passages that are under question are 2 in Genesis and 1 in Revelation. So let's start with Naomi, Genesis 15:17. Tammy can get Genesis 19:23. And Bill can get Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. We'll start with Genesis 15:17.
When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces.
Okay. Genesis 19:23.
The sun had risen upon the earth, and hot and to absorb.
Okay. And then Revelation chapter 7, verse 1.
After these things, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree.
What have we just done that shows that we have, if we're going to take that the earth is flat, if we're going to teach that, what have we done that shows that we are poor Bible students?
We don't look at any context.
We just read 3 verses. Is Genesis 15 really teaching about the shape of the earth? Is that the purpose of Genesis 15, to give us a scientific explanation of what shape the earth is? Naomi's shaking her head no. What's Genesis 15 talking about?
God's covenant with Abraham.
It's God's covenant with Abraham. If we're going to use Genesis 15 and focus in on verse 17 and say, well, God wrote this passage to teach us the earth is flat, you've missed the point of Genesis 15. All Genesis 15 is telling us is what time of the day. It mentions sunset. Same with Genesis 19, talking about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and when the sun had risen upon the earth. Whose perspective are we talking about when we say the sun has risen and the sun has set? From whose perspective? It's our perspective. From our perspective, does it appear that the earth is moving? Generally speaking, if we're not really paying too much attention. What? Pardon me?
We're moving too. So.
Well, we're moving too, yes. And if you've ever studied physics, like I'm talking about not basic physics. If you've actually studied physics, people ask the question, well, why don't we feel the earth moving? It's because, yes, we're moving too. But everything is in motion, and you don't feel it. Now, if the earth suddenly stopped moving, if it naturally stopped moving, we'll not deal with what happened in Joshua. But if it just physically stopped moving, we'd all die. Because it's just like hitting a brick wall. When you're driving in a car, you don't really feel the motion of the car. You know you're moving, like you're going from point A to point B, but you're moving along with the car. But if all of a sudden the car hit a brick wall, suddenly stopped, now all of a sudden you feel that force because you were moving, and that's what happens. This passage has nothing to do with the rotation of the earth or the position of the sun. From our perspective, the sun rises and the sun sets, and the sun is moving across the sky from our position. What do we know from science? What's actually moving? Yeah, but from our perspective, we say that the sun is moving. What has science actually told us is moving? The earth. The earth is revolving. The sun, in general, now the sun is moving too. When you get right down to it, the sun actually moves. But in our perspective, in general terms, in layman's terms, the sun is not moving. We're moving. Not only are we rotating on the Earth's axis, but the Earth is physically moving around the sun. 2 weeks ago, the Earth hit its closest point to the sun. Now, it's our winter, but that's why our winters aren't so frigidly cold, because we're at the closest point, but we're tilted away from the sun. So in other words, we don't get the direct sun. That's why Australia's in the summer. That's why Australian summers are so hot. It's because their summer hits when we are closest to the sun, whereas our summers hit when we are furthest from the sun, northern hemispheres. And so that's why our summers, generally speaking, are not as hot as Australia's summers. But we have to realize that when the Bible speaks of sunrises and sunsets, it's not telling us science. It's giving us our perspective. Same with Revelation 7 verse 1. What is the phrase, the four corners of the earth? What is that talking about?
Having the seed hold the idea of the whole earth, covering it all.
Yeah. Does a sphere have corners? No. A sphere does not have corners. We know that. You can, if you went up into the International Space Station, you could see the Earth. There are no corners up there. Why do we use the phrase, the four corners of the Earth? Is it because these people thought the world was flat? I don't believe so. You have Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers who had knowledge of the shape of the earth. But I think Bill had it right, that we use four corners of the earth because we're used to flat things. We're trying to say to encompass it all. And so a map has four corners. We take something that is spherical and we place it down on a flat piece of paper, and now all of a sudden our globe has four corners. We have flattened it out. Now we do a poor job at doing that, because when you take something that's spherical and then you try to flatten it out, you stretch in some places, make some places bigger, some places smaller. But Africa is much bigger than it appears in the map, and so is Greenland. Europe is actually, I think, much smaller than it appears on maps usually, just because of the way things are stretched out. It's amazing when Europeans stretch out the map, Europe winds up bigger than it is, and Africa winds up smaller. But that's neither here nor there. The Bible's not teaching the earth is flat. The Bible is not a science textbook. It doesn't mean that the Bible's lying to us. But from our perspective, it's telling things from our perspective. If I continue traveling on, it looks like flat land. Yeah, like we have hills and valleys, but it looks on the ground like it's flat. However, you look up into the sky, I have never understood why people think that the earth is flat based on the shape of the sky. It's this big circle up there. But the Bible does teach that the earth is spherical. It does teach it in places. It talks about, in Job 22:14, thick clouds cover him so he cannot see, and he walks above the circle of heaven. Proverbs 8:27, when he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, it goes on. Isaiah 40, verse 22, it is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants are like grasshoppers. Now again, those passages, we've got to be careful that we're not doing the same thing that the flat earthers are doing with the other passages. But if you're going to take that perspective from the flat earth perspective, you can't forget Job 22, Proverbs 8, and Isaiah 40. In truth, the Bible doesn't really say one way or the other what the shape of the earth is. I can't turn to the Bible for that type of thing. I can know from my observation that the earth is spherical, just from my own observation. We have taken pictures from the moon of the earth. We have taken pictures from space of the earth. I think this new telescope that went up there has taken pictures of the earth, or has from our perspective. The planets are all spherical. Jupiter's a sphere. Saturn's a sphere. Mars is a sphere. Why all of a sudden the earth is a different shape, I do not know. It's poor scientific discovery, and it's very poor Bible teaching to come along and teach one way or the other, because the Bible's not meant to be to talk about those things. Now, it does talk about things. Let's not say, well, the Bible never talks about science. It does. But we need to be careful how we use it. Any thoughts on the shape of the earth before we move on? If not, we'll go down to point C. Point B and C are very similar, but Tammy brought this one up a couple weeks ago, so I decided to go with point C. Are bats birds? Let's go to Leviticus 11. Let's go to Leviticus 11. We're going to read 13 to 20. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. We'll do 2 verses each. Leviticus 11, 13 to 20. We'll start with Henry and come up to Naomi and around.
This you shall record as an abomination among the birds. It shall not be eaten. They are an abomination, the eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, and the kite, and the falcon of the sky. even raven of his kind.
The ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the short-eared owl,
The white owl, the jackdaw, and the carrion vulture. The stork, the heron after its kind, the hoopie, and the bat.
All flying insects that creep on all fours shall be an abomination to you. Yet these you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours, those which have jointed legs above their feet, with which to leap on the earth.
Okay, and that's where we'll stop. What's the chapter about? Is it a taxonomy? Scientific taxonomy of animals? Yeah. This is a chapter on foods that are permitted. Is this list an exhaustive list? And by exhaustive, I mean it contains every animal that exists. No. We know there are more birds than this. There are sparrows, and there are ducks and geese and swans. They're not mentioned here. How is Israel to know which is clean and unclean if they're not listed here? Well, in one sense you say, well, no, they wouldn't, but if they're unclean, it was really important that they know they were unclean. You think about the animals themselves. At the beginning of the chapter, God said, choose the cud or splits the hoof. Had to have those two things to be clean. Has to chew the cud or split the hoof. And those were clean animals. Didn't give every animal that did that. It gave most of the animals. Cattle did that. But pigs didn't have the split hoof. And sorry, did have the split hoof, but didn't chew the cud. And so there were classifications. These animals here are typically among the birds that shall not be eaten. If you look at them, these are all animals that are scavengers. Eagles, buzzards, falcons, they eat other animals. Those are so when you find an animal here that is typically a scavenger, you know that's going to be unclean even if it's not listed here. Doesn't mean every animal is a scavenger. Don't take me the wrong way. Owls. I don't know how many owls are mentioned here. But owls would have been unclean. But we come to the bat. What is a bat? Oh, I'm not talking about the animal itself. What kind of animal is it? It's a mammal. Well, why does the Bible call it a bird here? Because it does.
The word that is used there can be translated bird, but it can also be translated fowl or winged animal.
Yes. Yeah. It's a winged creature. And so, yes, it's translated in some scriptures as birds. However, later on, when we started classifying animals more specifically, our translators translated that as winged creatures, because we now had a knowledge of what was actually being banned here. The bat was specifically banned. It was called a fowl or a winged creature. Some might have translated as birds because it flies. Generally speaking, larger animals that are classified. If you asked a child what type of animal is a bat, they're probably going to tell you a bird, because the children know birds fly. And but as we grow up, well, we understand. Okay, mammals are certain types of animals. They feed their young a certain way. There's live birth, and they have a backbone which makes them a vertebrate. There's many different scientific classifications of animals, and we have delineated species, and this is where the Genesis chapter 1 problem comes in. When we have subdivided every species into their own part species, so we have dogs, but we actually have poodles and bulldogs and all of these different types of species, and we come along as well. We read after their kind. Well, God made the bulldog, and he made the poodle, and he made the cocker spaniel. I don't believe that's what it's saying at all. God made dogs. All those dogs are dogs. They're not another type of animal. Theoretically, you can, in our day and age especially, mix breeds of dog. And you wind up with another type of dog. We had a cockapoo, which is a cocker spaniel, and a poodle. It's a dog. It was a dog. It wasn't any other type of animal. It was still a dog. My point is, the Bible is not a scientific textbook to give us biology taxonomy. We're approaching it from a 21st century perspective when the book of Leviticus was written in the 2nd millennia BC. The whole point of this chapter is not biology. The whole point of this chapter is what can you eat and what can you not eat. These are the specifications of those things you cannot eat. And if the things look like those things, you cannot eat them. But it's not specifically talking about every type of bat here, every type of heron, every type of vulture. It's meant not to teach that. So let's not approach it from that perspective. Any thoughts? I was going to do the mustard seed, but I think I'm going to leave the mustard seed. It's the same type of principle. That the mustard seed's a small seed. And we come along, there's other seeds that are smaller. Jesus is speaking in Palestine. Jesus is not being a botanist in Matthew chapter 13. But Israel, the mustard seed, the whole point of the parable of the mustard seed is not to give the biology of a mustard seed. Smallest of the seeds. And the whole point of the parable of the mustard seed is the church will start small, but it will grow enough into a tree that will be able to do and function the way it needs to function. And the last one we'll do is geocentrism. I think we look this up to make sure I got this right. Geocentrism is the Earth is the center of the solar system or the galaxy, whereas heliocentrism is where the sun is the center of our solar system. In other words, the question is, does everything revolve around the Earth, or does everything revolve around the sun in our solar system? And there's a lot of times, especially in some of the Middle Ages, where certain scientists were condemned for what they taught. And if people thought that it was contrary to what they thought the Bible taught. And I think there's a lot of revisionist history being done by the Roman Catholic Church onto what they did or did not do to Galileo and the reasons why they did it. But generally speaking, it was Galileo was teaching about the rotation of the Earth, and everything, and that we revolved around the sun, not the other way around. But Galileo is said to have put this way. I don't know if he actually said it, but this is what it's ascribed to him saying. It's the Holy Spirit intended to teach us in the Bible how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. And that's what I've been saying all night. God speaks to us through the Scriptures, not in order to make us mathematicians or biologists or historians, but in order to make us children of God. And so the point of the Bible is not to correct current teachings on cosmology, geography, medicine, or any other scientific field that is out there. The Bible's not given as a scientific textbook, and you should be thankful for that, because scientific textbooks generally are pretty hard to understand. And that's why a lot of people don't like going into science. They say, so it looks a lot of Greek to me. When the Bible touches on biology or scientific matters, it is accurate. But we shouldn't come looking to the Bible for the answer to every science question we have. Genesis chapter 1 gives us the origins of this universe and the origin of this earth, and it starts with, in the beginning, God. That's where we start. If God is trustworthy, if God is faithful, if God cannot lie, why in the second verse of the entire Bible does he start lying to us about where the heavens came from? It's a hubris on our part to think that man could not possibly understand it back then. So the Bible had to make this a myth. They had to create a myth that we could understand, and that over time science has shown us what the actual truth is. That really does make us seem smarter than the Greeks and the Romans and all of these Iron Age civilizations. Who are we to say that? I guarantee you, if this earth goes on in 2,000 more years, people are going to look back at our civilization and shake their heads as to what we accepted and to how we treated people. Now, I don't know in what direction they're going to go, but it always seems that one generation looks back at the previous generation and say how barbaric they were, how uncivilized they were, and then forget that a generation ahead is going to do the same with us. Nobody is perfect. But my point on Genesis chapter 1 is that if God created this earth in millions and millions of years, he would have told us that. We could have handled that because it's not a hard concept. This earth took a very long time to form. You're the last of creation. That's all he would have had to say. The Bible's not a scientific textbook. He wouldn't have had to go into all the scientific jargon about how this earth evolved. Wouldn't have had to do that if that's the way it went. That's not what he said. And so we have faith in what God says, not what man says. In our remaining time, I have one if you want, but if you don't, our homework question was, make a list of persons, places, events, or things which the Bible knew about long before modern history and archaeology, and also make a list of laws of nature. And I said pick one or the other. You don't have to go into exhaustive lists. Anyone got something from the Bible that the Bible knew about first and that we have later come to prove?
There's too many.
Pardon me?
Too many facts, not the facts Bible proves. It's scientific facts. Long time before, the human beings, modern scientists, discovered the laws, natural laws.
Yeah.
We know from the Bible. We studied before,
Yeah.
And we can look into the Google and other books.
Yeah.
There's one book I found in the Google is provenbible.com.
Yeah.
More than 100 facts chart
Yeah.
in this, and which is
You want to give an example?
the example is Job 26 was chapter 26 was 7. He hands the earth on nothing. He hands the earth on nothing. Earth filled up by elephants, science then, And by the Greek God, Atlas or something, in China something
Yeah.
gods, some animals, some gods. And this scientific people, human wisdom. Now the science now, modern science now, Earth surrounded by empty space in its orbit. That's what the science, modern science now is.
You think about that. It has been proven. I'll let you continue in a second. That had been proven in the lifetimes of some of the people in this room, with pictures from space to show that the Earth hangs on nothing. You want to continue?
Another is my favorite is the water.
Yeah.
The water, and in the Job, and also Ecclesiastes, and God told us the water is circulation, water circulation.
Yeah.
And in Job 38, verse 16, and have you turned to the spring of the sea? That's Bible teaches. Also in Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, from verse 5. And the sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hasten to the place where it goes, and when it goes towards the south and south. There also is the law of nature.
Yeah.
And turn around the south north. When words about continuity and comes again on its circuit. And the river is about water. Rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full to the place from which the rivers come. And there they return again. That's the same thing as the Job 38. That's the majority of the water. And the science then, and it says the water flows into the ocean only through the river and the rainfall.
Yeah.
That's a science, human wisdom knows at that time.
Yeah.
And now modern science now discovered springs in ocean were discovered in the 1970s.
Yeah.
I want to know the steam circulation of water, not from the water, from the air, from the spring.
I go to Genesis 7. The fountains of the deep were opened up.
Yeah.
We didn't know about the fountains of the deep. Like as far as it's a figure of speech, but it is saying it rained from the sky and the fountains of the deep opened up. The water came across on dry land. Why is it that this earth? Yeah, I like Job 38 a lot, even importantly, because that specifically is God speaking to Job. It says, where were you when I did these things? And those are things God did. And so Job 38 is one of those passages where the Bible is speaking about things that God did. And he said some things there that we could not prove and possibly could not prove. And I like your thing on the water. Psalms 8 verse 8, the paths of the sea. And this is one, Matthew Morey read this verse. And this is what, as far as this is the story. He read passages like this in the Bible that referred to paths of the sea. Little highways in the sea. And he wanted to say, is it true that there are paths in the sea? We have ocean currents, the jet stream, the Gulf Stream. It's wind, yes, but there are highways in the sea. There are ways that ships cross the oceans that are safer than just going wherever you want. The wind is going to blow you one way or another. Paul's ship was caught up in a storm that was well known, and the wind blew them across the sea wherever they went. But ships, if you're a sailor, you know where to travel. They've charted these things. There are paths in the sea. There are ways the ships can travel that the Psalms 8 verse 8 says. That can be observed but only observed from the psalmist's perspective. Doesn't necessarily mean it's so everywhere. But we found out it's true everywhere, because it's inspired of God. That was a good chart. Anyone got anyone others quickly, or have we basically covered what people had?
I just had my historical one, the Babylonian captivity, where they said it didn't happen, and then in 1930 they started finding the fashion, the pottery.
Yeah, like as far as history is history and science. The Bible speaks of it. And when we finally get around to showing what we actually know to be true, if the Bible spoke on it first, it was right first. So that's important that we realize that. Because our faith can be shaken if we start placing our trust in men instead of in God.
I'm not ashamed to hold my Lord